Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast. Good Reading is a monthly magazine dedicated to books and reading and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.
When I was 12 and we lived in Morningside on top of the hill, there were three of us upstairs, my father, my mother and me, and four quiet souls living downstairs underneath the house. My parents' cars no longer fit down there, what with the four kennels and the raised bench for treatments, the second-hand ultrasound with its clicking dials, and all the tins and barrels and buckets, some empty and others filled with different kibbles and powders, next to the perfectly good desk that my father had found at Tingalpa Tip, on which he mixed the dog's special meals. There were two sets of smaller scales for the food and big scales for the dogs, the double walking machine with the broken belt on one side that my father hadn't got round to fixing, breeding sheets, application forms and ledgers with times and distances for all the dogs we'd ever had and many more he took an interest in. There were always Hessian sugar bags, some soaking in buckets of bleach and others piled in a corner, washed and dried, but still blotchy with dark, creepy stains deep in the fibres and a bristled texture that made them awful to touch. On the wall were hooks for leads and muzzles and collars and a rack for coats, and between everything were murky crevices and cobwebs and, if you looked carefully enough, the twitching antenna that gave away a lurking cockroach. And most of all, that warm, clean smell of dog and the menthol of liniment.
Toni Jordan has worked as a molecular biologist, a quality control chemist, a TAB operator, and door-to-door aluminium siding salesperson. Toni is the author of 8 novels, including the international bestseller Edition, along with 9 Days, Our Tiny Useless Hearts, Dinner with the Schnabels, and Prettier If She Smiled More. And today I'm joined by Toni Jordan to talk about her latest novel, Tenderfoot. Toni, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, Greg. Thanks.
Toni, as I pondered the possible origins of the story in Tenderfoot, especially those involving greyhound racing and the art of gambling, I wondered what sort of lived experience might have been at its foundation. But then a quick glance at your biography reminded me of your rich and varied work history.
This is clearly not my family. I have a sister. And my grandmother lived with us in childhood, and my mother was never a barmaid, so clearly it's not my family, but I did certainly grow up in that world. We had greyhounds. My parents were greyhound trainers, and my first job, I think, is what you're referring to, was at my mother's TAB agency, where I worked all through my teens. And it's a very distinct world, that world of early greyhound racing, and the families that hung out there and the people who went to the track. And I have very vivid memories of all the hours spent with the greyhounds and at greyhound tracks and at the TAB that I wanted to capture in a story.
And although it's not a memoir, it reads a little bit like a memoir, and a very poignant one at that. But I suppose that might be the result of the meeting of a very fertile imagination and very fond memories of childhood.
Very fond memories. Andie's a little bit older than me, I'm happy to confess, but I really wanted to capture those feelings of childhood. People look back on it as such a golden time, and in many ways it certainly was for me. But there's a lot of meat in there too. There's a lot of feelings of being helpless. You don't have very much power or agency. You're kind of, and you don't understand the way the world works and other people's motivations for doing things. Things happen that you truly don't understand. And that's something else I wanted to capture. I understood very little of adult life as a child. My world was very small. And I wanted to write one of those books where the reader understands what's going on in Andie's life and in Andie's family, but Andie doesn't understand it herself. I've written books like this before, like my first novel, Edition, was a little bit like that. And that's what the beauty of having a first person narrator. You can have her very firmly and confidently declare something, and the reader can understand that's not what's happening at all.
And I suppose putting Andie in that position as the narrator, we start to see not just the world through the eyes of a child, but in a way, the author occupying the mind of that child, in this case, Andie Tanner. I felt her pain, but I couldn't help feeling that you might be Andie, and in a way, so was I. And Andie's a kind of universal child, a universal character.
Well, we all love those plucky kids in books. I remember I can think back to a lot of books that I love where the narrator is some kind of plucky kid going on adventures. And there's something, what do they call those TV series now? Kids on Bikes, like kids shows set in the 70s and 80s where children went out riding their bikes in the afternoon and had these kind of adventures. So I guess I was looking for an experience that's a little bit universal to tap into that idea of how childhood is very different today. I often go and speak to schools about my work. I'm very fortunate to be invited to speak to kids of all ages. And it's remarkable to me how vivid my childhood is and how foreign that childhood is to young people today. So I guess I also wanted to make a record of those feelings and the kind of adventures and the kind of ideas that children have or had back back in the 70s. And I wanted to capture the music and the food and just the very small, it strikes me now how very small our lives were back then.
Tenderfoot is set in suburban Brisbane, Morningside, in the 1970s, equally relatable to any Australian city in that period of time, from the Sunny Boys and the Strawberry Quick, all things that I know and relate to, the Twirly Whirly and the Clinkers, for a bit of extra spice. Now, this is specialised and detailed knowledge that could only be harboured by a girl of the 70s.
Absolutely right. One of the joys of writing this book is when I finished, my kind publishers got me to put together a playlist. So there's also a playlist on Spotify. So I got to kind of think about all those songs that I used to listen to, and music was so important, and how much I loved going to the movies and just capturing again that world. But I also remember the first time I ever saw a zucchini and was just completely confused, and what was this thing even, and my grandmother kind of boiling the shit out of it and putting white sauce on the top, because kind of what else did you do with it? So the world is opening up. It's a very pivotal time, and the reason I said it in 1975 particularly is I really think that was a turning point in Australian history, where everything started to change. It's almost like you can look at Australia before then and after then. And I wanted to show that this year was a turning point in the life of this young girl as well. I've always been really interested in these moments where everything changes. And I guess I was trying to find that for Andie, and it didn't turn out to be one moment. I couldn't put it down to a moment. It's of some months of her slowly kind of coming to realizations about the world that she lives in. And it's that idea when your view of the world changes. It's a series of these kind of moments where her eyes are kind of opening, and she's figuring out the world. And I look back on my life and I can see so many moments when I realized I was wrong about everything, and everything kind of changed. I would never have, like Andie, as a child growing up, I thought I would be a greyhound trainer, and that would be my life. And I had this idea as a small child that I would sleep on the bed with all my dogs, or if I had too many dogs to sleep on the bed with me, I would make a roster where they all took turns sleeping in my bed with me. I didn't think about a partner, or, what they would think, but in my mind, that was kind of going to be my life. And I was so quite confident of that. But your childish things are put behind you, and you as you learn more about yourself and about the world.
There's a very nice passage there where I think you say, childhood is as much a place as it is a time.
I think about that very much. If I go back to Morningside for any reason, it's a completely different suburb than the one I imagine. It's a very gorgeous kind of middle class, beautiful suburb with lovely houses, and the creek has all been kind of cemented over, and it doesn't have that wild feel it had 50 years ago. It's horrifying to think it's 50 years ago. I've been told, Greg, that it's classified as historical fiction, this book, because it's 50 years ago, which was a horrifying realization for me.
It's an interesting way to look at it. One of the things that I admired about this book, and it's a fairly common device to slip between the past and the future as a literary device, but you do it so easily. Sometimes I don't even know that I slipped forward and that I slipped back in time.
You could not have said anything nicer to me. That voice took ages. If I can just get a little writing nerd for a minute, I tried a number of different voices for the beginning of this book. I tried a very childish and staying consistently childish kind of point of view. And I tried something, a third person. So I was looking at it from like a different perspective, an omniscient perspective. And when I came across this idea of this kind of flowing voice that tried to move relatively seamlessly between the past and the present with a rhythm to it, I knew I was setting myself up for a headache, because it's very hard to maintain that kind of seamless flow. But it was something that I really wanted to kind of achieve. So it was a lot of trial and error at the beginning. But I'm really glad I persevered.
You write so lovingly about greyhounds, and very authoritatively too. Are you some greyhound reincarnated?
Wouldn't that be a lovely thought? But the thing about greyhounds are they are sprinters, so they can go very fast for a very short period of time, and my athletic ability does not extend even to that. I can relate to the part of the greyhound that like sleeps for 23 hours a day, but maybe not that short burst of energy. I don't even have that. I've had a lot of greyhounds in my life. Since leaving home, I mostly lived in places with stairs, and they have a bit of a difficulty with stairs, and I have a bit of a difficulty negotiating them up and down stairs. So I've had whippets since leaving home, and I'm between dogs at the moment. Greyhounds particularly are the most beautiful animals. And I'm sure that anybody who knows a greyhound or knows someone with a greyhound knows how ardently people love them, because they're just charming animals. And I hope to have captured something of their spirit in the book.
Let's talk about Andie for a moment. Andie's quite the philosopher. She's described as field shy, and that's a term usually applied to greyhounds. How does it apply to Andie?
Well, I think growing up as an only child, I didn't grow up as an only child, thankfully. I had my sister to keep my feet on the ground. But in my imagination, an only child who spends all of her time with adults is kind of not really mature beyond her years, because she's not really, but knows how to pretend to be mature beyond her years. So other children seem a bit raucous to her, seem a bit rough and tumble, and she's far more, she's happy to sit down at a table. She's not restless. And her mother is also very keen on manners, as my mother also was. So she does a good facade of being a grown-up person. But regardless of what facade she has, she's 12 on the inside. So she can still kind of, she's not an angel at school. She still fights with the other kids when they fight with her. She's not in any way, a victim or an innocent party, but she does do a good job of pretending to be more mature than she is, because she hangs around with adults so much. Hands behind your back, she said, but my hands were there already, so I wouldn't be tempted to touch anything, and just as well. Everything was glossy and beautiful and smelled wonderful. Maya was white and clean and magical. My mother laughed. If your eyes open any wider, your eyeballs will pop out. We ended up in a changing room in the lingerie department, among all that silk and lace the colour of cream and caramel and ebony, the lush richness of being a woman. I sat on a pink velour stool in the corner while my mother tried on bras, helped by a stocky, dark-haired older woman with a tape measure around her neck. We have some lovely styles on sale if madam is interested, the Maya lady said. Do I look like I need a bargain? My mother said. I'll try the fanciest ones you've got with lace, thanks all the same. And does the young lady need fitting also? The Maya lady said, as she measured my mother. She's flat as a tack still, thank Christ, my mother said, nodding at me. It can't last. She'll be carrying around udders like the rest of us before too long. The Maya lady lowered her voice. Sleeping in a braai helps keep them under control, she said, glancing at me. Only take them out in the shower. I sleep in the raw, thanks all the same, my mother said. I'd feel I was being strangled in the night. You're right, though. Listen to her, Andie. The Maya lady slipped my mother's arms into a beautiful white satin bra with lace at the top of the cups. I also tell my girls to stop running around and don't move too quickly. And don't let men play with them, she said. You're right about that as well, my mother said. She leaned forward to redistribute the cups and then said to me, enjoy it while you can, Andie. Boobs ruin your life.
Andie's mother, Val, is beautiful, glamorous, at least to Andie. She's also a little impatient, has lots of advice for Andie, very sage advice.
Yes, Val is, of course, she was a delight to write because she's so funny. Has so much energy. She's so unpredictable. And a lot of her advice is also contradictory. Things that she'll say in 1 minute is opposed to what she'll say the next minute. And I think there's something about being in close contact with a parent and not quite knowing which way they're going to jump that leads to people being very good observers. So to me, it's the relationship between Val and Andie. Val being unpredictable has led to Andie being a person who watches for signs. Is she going to be in a bad mood today? Is she going to be in a good mood today? What do I say to get the right response? And so I didn't want Andie to be one of these just blessedly brilliant children that you sometimes read in books that are born geniuses and are just naturally in some way gifted. I think she's learnt to be an observer and she's learnt to be a little bit philosophical, as you say, because she's very keenly been noticing everything that her mother does. And this awakens in her a degree of observation and enables her to form conclusions, right or wrong, about the world in a way that perhaps a child in a more stable parental relationship wouldn't have. So it goes on to be, I imagine her life, it going on to be almost a superpower of hers, where she can look at people, really look at them, really see what's going on with them. And that's something that she was forced into, but it's something that hopefully will benefit her in the long run.
Of course, the other figure, and a very important figure in her life, is her father. He's some kind of hero, one of the greatest greyhound trainers ever to have lived, according to Andie.
Andie absolutely idolizes Eddie, her father. Again, it's kind of one of these relationships that it's almost the three of them in this kind of triangle where the three relationships, Eddie and Val, Eddie and Andie, and Andie and Val. It's a triangle of the three of them and they each play out against each other. So whereas Val is completely unpredictable and quite wild, Eddie then becomes kind of a hero to Andie and really godlike in what she considers how he does things and just the joy she has from being around him. And so it's that kind of delicate balance when one parent is volatile, you want the other one to be stable. And it's a very important relationship for Andie because it's who she really models herself on. She feels like she can never be she can never be as beautiful as Val or as glamorous as Val. So I guess that makes her father more of a role model for her.
I do want to talk about Steve, but I don't want to give too much away. And the only thing I'll say about Steve is that he's missing one finger.
He is missing one finger. Steve is Val's boyfriend, Andie's mother's boyfriend. He kind of appears in the story as a bit of a shock for Andie. She doesn't realize that Val even had a boyfriend and she doesn't know anything about him. And he moves into their house. And again, she's trying to observe because she's this kind of child who grew up with a volatile mother. She's trying to figure him out. What is his deal, I guess? And she's very curious and she's very brave. And she really wants to work out whether he's a safe person around her mother. And she feels a sense of protection toward Val. And so she will really do anything to look after her. So it's a bit of a shock to the system, and she's got to try and figure it out. And she's a brave girl, very wrong about almost everything, but she will try and figure things out.
This is an absolutely hilarious book. In your previous book, Prettier If She Smiled More, the humour was kind of laced with sarcasm, but also with pathos, elements that worked very nicely and naturally together. In Tenderfoot, though, your humour presents us as something more open, honest, tender, tinged with nostalgia rather than that sarcasm of Prettier If She Smiled More.
Thank you. That's really lovely. I think that books without humour are almost dishonest to me. Like, I understand that life is largely tragic, but it's also very funny. And I truly can't imagine the world without some kind of humour. But as you've remarked, the humour has to come from the character. So if the character is a cynical, sarcastic kind of person, the humour has to be that way. If the character is a wide-eyed 12-year-old girl, the humour has to come from another direction. My mother and my grandmother were both very funny people, and I was brought up really in a very funny house. And my sister is actually the funniest person you would ever meet in your life. Makes me look very dull in comparison. Life is very, very funny to me, and if it's not in there in some degree, it's not an honest story.
In many ways, Tenderfoot is about change, the process of change, that move from childhood to adulthood, and that it's sometimes fluid and sometimes not.
Yes, and sometimes I think we're not really adults at all. we're children on the inside, dressed up in our best clothes, walking around trying to fool people into thinking we're grown-ups. So many times I kind of feel like I'm still a teenager or a young child inside, and I'm hoping that no one around me notices.
My final thought about this book is memory is this sort of blending of the past and the present, but as inseparable experiences, past and present.
I could not have said that better myself. In remembering the past, we're filtering it through our present selves and our present experiences, and the person that we were all those years ago is a stranger to us in a lot of ways.
Toni, it's a beautiful story, and thank you for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you, Greg.
I've been talking to Toni Jordan about her latest novel, Tenderfoot. It's published by Hachette, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to Good Reading print and online magazine at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.